like to think about my educational background like a dirt gravel road going through the mountains of Colorado. I'd say for about the past 20 years, I went to many different schools studying art, all the way from the West Coast to the Midwest. None of them which I earned a degree from, but sometimes that's just what happens. So, because of all the different, I studied apparel design, graphic design, photography, and painting. Because of all the different mediums that I studied, I feel like they had a really big influence on my painting. And I always knew that painting was the one that I wanted to focus on. But of course, I had to try everything else out first. So, the title of the collection, Contradictions, was actually a blog post that I wrote about a year ago. And it was when I was working on a lot of works, like pieces on small paper. And I noticed that I was making a lot of work that felt very natural and organic. But when that happened, I really withdrew from the work, and I wanted to add brighter colors and more geometric shapes. So I guess I was searching for this balance of natural yet artificial. And I was really interested in why that was happening for me. I just wanted to know what was happening internally for myself. So through thinking about that more, I came to realize that I was yearning for two environments that felt very contradictory towards one another. Things such as an open mountaintop, but also the comforts of my laptop or cell phone and technology. So there was just this really harsh contradiction happening. It was almost as if I wanted nothing, but I wanted everything as well. So this collection was a way for me to explore both of those environments and just really be a part of both of those worlds. I started a small clothing line. It was called Acre in 2017, and I was making a lot of just really minimal clothes and using lots of organic cotton and linen. And I designed all the patterns and was sewing all the pieces, and then I was also exploring like lots of natural dyes and painting on the textiles. So I feel like that whole process is definitely like I've brought that into my painting. So I do start with raw canvas, but I also add a very watered down layer of gesso. And initially I was just doing the raw canvas, but I just wasn't sure how it would look up. So I decided to add a very, very thin layer of gesso with lots of water. But I was trying to maintain I wanted to make sure the canvas was still porous so that the paint would soak through. All of these are acrylic paints. I use a heavy-bodied acrylic paint, and then I also add a matte medium, and then I add different levels of water depending on how saturated I want the colors to be in the end. I use a lot of foam brushes and also mop head brushes, and then sometimes I'm not using any brushes at all. I'm just pouring the paint directly onto the canvas as it sits on the ground. Just letting it absorb. So I tried to keep the pieces pretty minimal. I like to show the canvas, and I think that's just my appreciation of the material itself. And I want the canvas to be I want it to be as important as the color and the marks. I want them to all show equally. So in trying to keep the compositions minimal, there's not a lot of room for error, and that can be very challenging. I can add one mark or what I feel to be the wrong color, and the painting is suddenly gone. So there's a lot of time for being really quiet and still when trying to decide what to do next. So I've recently started doing a little bit more thumbnail sketching and testing on smaller pieces before working on the actual canvas, and that's been helpful. So that's changed the process a little bit. So this particular piece is stitched together, and this piece was actually originally a larger piece. It was a 20 by 20, and I felt like I had lost it, or I was like on the verge of losing it. And so I took the canvas off of the frame, but I wasn't really ready to part ways with it, and I really wanted to try to bring it back. So I have this old photography piece that I had done years ago, where I took a series of self-portraits, and I had all these different facial expressions, and then I printed the photos and cut them into strips, and then I reassembled them into a new composition. So I thought that I could do that with the painting. So I just cut it up. I cut it up, and then I reassembled it and stitched it back together. So the process was I was very careful and thought a lot about how the painting was going to wrap around the frame, and then also how much I wanted to stretch the painting over the frame, because I had to think about the stitching and how much of the stitching was actually going to show, and then even the back, what that was going to look like. I feel like this was one of the last pieces that I did, and I feel like that piece really came together really well for me. It felt like all of these things that I had been learning over the years, like, you know, the apparel design and photography and graphic design and, you know, painting, it was like, I felt like I kept hitting these dead ends. But then when I made this piece, I felt like it all came together, and it was really exciting. So I'm hoping, or I'm planning on doing more of that on a larger scale. And then I'm also thinking about removing the canvas from the frame. Influences are definitely Helen Frankenbauer, and even people that aren't painters. There's a small clothing label, they're called State the Label, they're based out of Georgia, and she does a lot of hand-painted textiles. A lot of it looks like the soap stain technique. And also Jes Moran, she's from Denver. She does a lot of hyper-realistic, very colorful. Her older work is a lot of portraits and nude figures. And then Lisa Condon, she's based out of Portland. She's actually an artist and illustrator. And she has a really unconventional story of how she became an artist, and that was really inspiring to me. And she kind of got me motivated to start a regular practice. So, that's it. Any questions?